So this one, I think, is Brad. You have Nearfield subs. I have one Nearfield sub. So Jason asked, does anyone know how far Nearfield subs should be placed behind you?
Personally,
be careful. Aaron's here. He might have some calculations here.
That's okay. No, I mean, for me, as close as you can to your to the back of the basically I recline the theater seat all the way, and then I put the sub up until I can't. I think John on one of Michael's streams was mentioning this because he has Nearfield and he does the same thing.
Yeah.
And I've found that to basically if you put it too far away, if you're putting it a foot away, I don't know if it would technically be classified as Nearfield anymore, right. Would it?
Yeah, his advice is whatever.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron might have more. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you got an 18, you want it about, within 18 inches of where your back's going to be. If you got a 24, you got a little bit more room. You can have it within 24. So that's just kind of a general rule. I don't think it's set in stone, but you can definitely play what you can get. That's for sure. You don't want it. Whole purpose is for it to be near field.
Yeah,
and to be that, it needs to be pretty close to you.
Aaron, is there some kind of wavelength kind of calculation that would determine about how far a subwoofer should be? Because I know you've talked about it before, numerous times. You've done the whole thing, and is there an optimal distance before you start? I guess incorporating the room. Right, so I mean, I don't.
When you're talking about subwoofers, it's different than a speaker, right? Because the speaker you're talking about where the tweeter and the mid-range would combine in waveform. But you don't really have that issue with a sub. I would say, just kind of based on how everybody else seems to be talking about it, I would say probably within a quarter of the a quarter wavelength of the shortest distance from the subwoofer and you to the wall or a wall, ceiling, or whatever. Since it's sitting on the floor doesn't matter. So
he speaks.
I would kind of just guess that would be what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So hold on a second. You got to slow down. I'm the S. I'm the S on the end of the kiss. So, you know what I mean?
Right. So here's the deal. Right. Subwoofer wavelengths are really, really long. So if you're talking about being out in free field, you're out and literally in a field, you're pretty much always going to be near field to the subwoofer wavelengths, right? 80 hertz and below. So I just did the math real fast. So the wavelength of 80 hertz, the full wavelength, is 168 inches. So what is that? 100 feet? About 14 feet. So anything within about 14 feet, you're well within the wavelength of the subwoofer. But what you guys are talking about, it seems to me like it's more in the vein of at what point does a subwoofer experience some kind of destructive or constructive interference from the walls or a sofa or anything like that? So if somebody was saying if you can give me a number, I would say maybe a quarter wavelength or a half a wavelength from the shortest distance surface. So meaning if you're sitting in a chair in the center of a 16-foot wide room and that's the shortest distance because let's say the ceiling is 20 feet tall or something, I'm just making numbers up. Mm-hmm. So you're halfway in between 16 feet. So that's 8 feet. So I would say a quarter wavelength of that would probably be pretty darn good for saying that you're not going to have any room influence causing any kind of constructive or destructive cancellation with that subwoofer. So a quarter wavelength of, let's see, 8 feet. About 12. That's times 12. And that is 22. Did I do that right?
That's awesome.
Welcome to Aaron's math corner.
That's right. That's his core.
I was watching Joe's face, Aaron, while you were talking, and you guys know that meme of the woman with all the numbers flying in front of her face? That was Joe. Yeah. He's doing long division in his head.
Right. A quarter wavelength of that would be, if I'm doing this right, that would be about 35 inches or so. I think, and most of you guys are talking about being within a few feet, right, of the subwoofer. So but that's an opinion. That's not really based on anything. That's just kind of thinking that, okay, most of the time where you really start to get into issues with the walls influencing the sound is going to be if it's less than a quarter wavelength. Right. And so I would say as long as you're within a quarter wavelength of the shortest distance of you versus a wall. and then you would have to do.
Okay, so within a few feet.
I'd say within a few feet,
wall's 8 feet.
You're within it. Yeah, I'd say that. But also consider that you've got a ceiling mode too, right? So that subwoofer's omnidirectional. So this is the other thing too. How big is a subwoofer? If it's
part of what you're trying
subwoofer, right? Yeah, I mean, you would have figured it all out.
Would a simple way be to say, like, take your nearest wall and then do a quarter of that would be the minimum or the maximum distance?
I think that's reasonable. Again, I'm kind of
like a base
saying this
guideline.
off the top of my head.
Right?
Yeah,
like
I'd say that's probably a reasonable way to go
nearest
about it.
Wall, take about a quarter, and that's the maximum you're.
Here's what you do: you shoot Aaron an email. Say, Aaron,
nope.
I'll fly you out to my house. Can you fix
Join my Patreon?
Can you measure? I want you to measure. Come over just to measure.
I need to see some graphs.
Make sure to check out our audio-only version of the podcast at anchor.fm/Daily HiFi, or just go to your favorite podcasting service and search for Daily HiFi.